Jones. Wait, what did I just do? I just called you my old boss.
It's amazing. I was like, I'm gonna just smile. Good thing you have an editor and it's not live.
I
Because that's
know, I know.
like getting the name
Uh,
right is 101.
I know,
Awesome.
I know. And like Robyn Jones is one of my favorite people in the world, and you guys
Oh,
are like
good. That makes me
sisters.
happy.
Yeah, so I guess let's do this 2.0. Like, that is really, really funny. So, well, I am so happy, Robyn, to see you on the show today. Thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
I am so excited to be here.
What a funny little intro that just was. We'll leave that for us.
Yes.
um, so there's so much I want to talk to you about. I feel like you're like my non-biological sister.
I love that.
Yeah.
I feel the same about you, but not as a sister, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
I feel
like
like we've known each
I
other a long time and we're very simpatico on, I mean, we'll probably get to this and I might just be hijacking your interview, but we're both community builders and
yes.
real lovers of connecting dots and opportunities and companies and people. And then I feel like in the reunited version of us, because we hadn't talked in a while, we've both been really what I call in our internaut phases, right? As opposed to an astronaut. I feel like
Oh, I
internaut,
like that.
which is just sort of doing a lot of work, really exploring who we are, what we
Yes,
choose to
this is
learn and
very true.
unlearn.
Yeah, this is a great context for the interview because the work you're doing as a consultant and coach, I think, is really awesome, and I've learned a lot from you. And yeah, I'm really been really looking forward to this conversation. Yeah, and you've been a great friend to Holden, my wife, as well. I mean, we had a relatively small wedding, and you were there for us, and we
It
really
was
appreciated
beautiful.
that. That
I
was a
love
beautiful
that
day.
wedding, and it's in such a magical place, which I will always identify with you and Holden every time I go to Joshua Tree.
Yeah, yeah, it's beautiful. Pressing rewind, I'm trying to remember the first time we met, and it must have been circa 2009, 2010, LA
Uh-huh.
Tech kind of. Uh, that was that kind of that social 2.0 wave that kind of took over the markets post GFC, Great Financial Crisis.
Yep.
I don't remember the first time I met you, which is surprising because you're such an unforgettable person. It might have
I
just
feel like
been,
it might have been at like a digital family reunion. I mean, there were sort of those early events that you and I would both
yeah,
host and be at. So I think in the context of that, or perhaps one of those Christmas parties,
yeah,
holiday parties, I should say,
yeah,
that you hosted
yeah. Those are
might be
such
it.
great
Yeah.
times. Yeah, and then I remember reconnecting with you at some kind of digital event on off Wilshire, probably like 2011 or something, and really kind of had an awesome conversation with you. It's like I want to get to know her better, and I think that's when we officially kind of became quote unquote friends. And I kind of followed you a little bit, so I did some consulting with Jason Nazar at DocStock in
Oh,
2012,
yeah.
and you had been there I think a year or two before that.
I love
Um,
how the world just kind of, particularly in the tech ecosystem, thank goodness it's growing and it's lovely that LA is now this large ecosystem. But I love that it's still a little bit of a small circle and that you get these connections. I was speaking on a panel last night about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and somebody asked me for a tool, and Jason's comparably came up. And
sure.
so that's 2 times in 2 days that I've heard his name, and I haven't heard his name in a while.
Yeah, yeah, great guy. I was doing some scuttlebutt research for our interview. You and I have 370 mutual contacts. That's a lot of mutuals.
A lot, but not surprising to me.
Yeah, yeah,
But that is a
totally.
lot. You that might be the largest overlap I have with somebody,
Yeah,
maybe.
yeah, it's pretty high. So pressing rewind, I know a bit about your personal story. You grew up in the Midwest in Indianapolis, right?
I did. People think I'm a New Yorker, and I did live in New York for a long time before I moved to LA, but I'm a Hoosier.
How was that growing up in the Midwest?
Oh, I loved it. I'm one of the only people I know that actually loved high school. The Midwest, it's a little bit of apple pie Americana and family values, a lot of sports. You know this about me. I mean, I'm a sports girl. My dad was the coach to all of my teams. And I really loved it. And everybody in Indiana and everybody in my family, you graduate and you go to Indiana University. And I read a US News and World Report back when we read magazines, which you and I both are old enough to admit we did. And it talked about this new field of study called entrepreneurship. And it was Babson or USC,
Yep.
right? Not IU. And I was smart enough being in Indiana to be like, I want to go to LA. So I marched into my parents' room and was like, this is what I want to do. And, I don't think it was their ideal place and that everybody kind of assumed you'll go to IU. I was also valedictorian of my high school and, was going to go where I wanted to go. And so they
Cool.
knew
Fun
that they weren't
fact.
exactly, I was telling them more than I was asking them. Um, you know, but back to my childhood, my grandfather was an orphan turned entrepreneur, turned himself from like rags to riches story. And I'm
Wow.
named after him.
Cool.
And I was just like, I'm glued to him. He taught me how to trade stocks when I was like 11, something you and I also have in common, though you're still in it and I'm not in it as much. It,
Legend.
I've got a toddler to run around after, so maybe I'll get back in the game at some point. But taught me to trade stocks when you really had to look in the newspaper and look at the ticker symbols, right? Like
Yeah.
old school. Um, and he was, the guy I looked up to, and it was like, I want to be an entrepreneur like my grandfather. And so, I believe that careers are like jungle gyms. I just happened to be one of those people who sort of was on a pretty straight path. Now, I've done everything within the entrepreneurial ecosystem, but, this was sort of in the stars for me. I feel like I've always known that this was the path I was taking.
What was your grandpa's name?
Robert,
Robert.
I was
Yeah,
named
that's
after him.
yeah, Robert. Yeah, that's amazing. Robert Ward, dad's side.
Robert Fisher, my mother's father. And
It's
my
so
mother
cool.
also, growing up for the times, was a successful career woman and mother, and that was
Mhm,
not common. So I
mhm.
would say that, that also had a very big influence on me.
That's where you get the moxie. I love that.
I
Um,
definitely get the moxie from my mom, Biff Ward. She's quite the like business community woman in Indianapolis, Indiana. I don't know that there was room for two of us, so I had to come to Los Angeles.
I love that. How, so you went to USC. I've had a few people from SC on the show, and this kind of Trojan network effect is a real thing. Has that been for
It
you?
is such a real thing. I'm very involved in USC. It was one of the gems from me moving back from New York. I've co-taught classes for 8 years. I'm on a pause because aforementioned child, baby. Um, I love it. The entrepreneur program is solid. The engineering program is solid. The film school is solid and comms is solid. And it's just at the intersection of the city and all of those things. And so, I'm biased, but when I was in my operating days, I mean, Paige and I, for better works, man, I just recruited like 25 kids to do the inside sales, all from USC. They've all, in their own ways, gone on to be really successful entrepreneurs and businessmen and women, of course. But yeah, I feel like USC is a real pillar to the community, and I'm really happy that that also happens to be my alma mater.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you're teaching there a bit now too, right?
Yeah, well, I really taught for 8 years, co-taught. I taught launching new ventures. The first year was with the teacher who taught me when I was a student, really
That
special. She
is
brought me in.
amazing. What's her
Then I
name?
taught it with an amazing LA ecosystem venture capitalist named Scott Lynette. We
Mhm.
moved to doing investing in ventures because I went from being an operator to an investor. And then when I started coaching, I co taught a class called Performance Mindset for Business. And I
Mhm.
loved that. I even did it the first semester that we went to Zoom. And I did it when I had a baby. So my little child was sometimes crying and I'd have to pause. And then it was one of those things where I just had to, really draw some boundaries and realize that it might be something I need to put on pause. The good news is I think I'm going to start again next semester. So
That's
very excited.
amazing. Love that. Who was the teacher that you had that you co-taught with? What was that
Her name is
person's name?
Kathleen Allen. She has
Mhm.
since retired. She is amazing. She, was in the early days probably the only woman on the faculty. Um, if you talk to anybody who's ever graduated the Greif School, they will tell you the name of the person that just inspired them and influenced them. There's a few
Mhm.
different names, and mine was Kathleen Allen, but it really
Yeah.
speaks to the strength of the program that folks continue to have relationships with the folks that taught them when they were in college.
Yeah. I just love great teachers. They're
Yeah.
they're the best. It doesn't get any much better, and I have so many that I am grateful for. And having said that, what's sort of an insight from SC that has stuck with you, or some fundamentally changed you, or sort of fortified or propelled you? Anything from
I
school
might
that was
say that this idea of relationship, the
mm,
way the Greif Center is really built is experiential. So even when I was there, my favorite class, which today is every student's favorite class, is when they bring in the past entrepreneurs that are really successful in the LA community. And those are the people that also offer internships. And so there's just a real network effect and a real networking bonus to having gone to USC. That I think that other schools, even if it was a school that's in the city, I think that USC sort of excels at it. And it is one of the things that was a big part of the program, which is yes, you're going to learn all of these things, but we want you to go out and get internships that we're going to help you get because there's no better way to learn entrepreneurship than to be thrown into it, right? Like you're not going to read a textbook and become a great entrepreneur. And so the value of being hands-on, but then the value of just network and go out and build and meet, this is what I talk to my students about. It's like, you want to be a venture capitalist, you should be going to all the VC events. You need to meet people now. You need to connect the dots. And, I think you and I have a part of our personality that have a bent towards that. But I
yep.
do think that for me, USC really like enforced that and brought it out in me. And it has been such an important part of my success in my career that I have to acknowledge that piece of it.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. I mean, I know a lot of people, but you know even more. It's remarkable, your network.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but I'm part of that is because I went to
yeah,
school here.
yeah, yeah, fair. Great. And then what was your on-ramp into tech? You got out of school. I floundered for a bit. I did some music stuff, and then I got into real estate, which was awesome for 4 or 5 years. And then the great financial crisis happened. I got wiped out. And then I had this kind of aha moment that I talk about quite frequently on the show. But what was that for you? What was that journey into tech for you?
So it's interesting. I mean, I could have answered this last question this way, but I'm going to really date myself. But my junior year of college, I spent the whole year in the basement of the library where they had the computers. So I did, right? And you had to sign up to get computer time, and you didn't get to
Yeah.
hog the computer. So you had to hop off and get back
Yeah.
on.
Log
And
into
it
your
was,
Hotmail account.
uh-huh. And it was Netscape Navigator. And I was in entrepreneurial classes. And a lot of the stuff that people were talking about building were obviously like brick and mortar businesses and brands and products. And my group creating our business plan created something called Text Express, which is a modern day book delivery. Which again, this was like not when Amazon was a hot thing. So all of us, whenever we run into each other, we're like, damn, we should have really gone with it. We won best business plan. And the whole concept was like, why are we going and waiting at the college bookstores? Why don't you order online? Why is that not delivered to your door? Yada, yada, yada. So I was really early on where I became obsessed with the entire blank space and blue ocean that was an internet type of business. So what I didn't do was just immediately get a job there. LA didn't have a heavy tech scene at the time. And I didn't know where to start. So at that time, people sort of did out of business school, you were a consultant, you were a banker, you were a lawyer. So I went and did banking for 2 years and figured getting my financial chops would be smart. But also, I used that. This is when I went to New York. So I used that to get to New York. And then fairly immediately, once I got into New York, which was a hot early internet bed, right? I used being a healthcare investment banker to help us get into the WebMD IPO. And from there, I jumped ship to an early internet e-commerce business. So, with the little investment banking in between, because I didn't know how to get the leap in, I was pretty clear that I was going to go into the new business building blank space that was the internet, the World Wide Web, as we called it, right?
Yeah. So that iBanking stint, that was at Donaldson.
Yes, at Donaldson, Lufkin, and Jenrette, a
Yeah.
very special time and like a special boutique investment bank that I learned so much in 2 years. I never regret that, but I also knew I was never going to be a lifetime banker. But it really prepares you for hard work in the world.
Yeah, well, that's well said. Did you ever do any work with Milken or the Milken Institute?
So, well, Jason and I did a little work with Milken because we used to put on Startups Uncensored there once it got
Yeah.
bigger.
Yeah.
Not when I was at Donaldson, Lufkin, and Jenrette. The guys, though, that were in the LA office before I transferred to New York were all the Drexel Burnham guys. So you would love that, and we can talk stories one day.
Yeah.
But a lot of the old school guys were the MDs in the LA office, and Ken Moelis, who has since gone on to build a giant investment banking arm that's mostly focused on media, was the guy that ran the office. And he used to sit in the bullpen with us. Real cool guy. But there was definitely like a vibe that you would enjoy that was from like the old school that also like ties into why I had even read like Liar's Poker in the first place, blah, 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 right?
Sure.
Connect the dots on that, but we'll keep that one there.
So then that was interesting. So then you were at, was it, how do I pronounce this? Oanda?
Yeah. So interestingly enough, it's O&A, so it's Oanda, but it's Olson and Associates. It was so it was fintech before we called anything fintech.
Totally. That makes sense.
Yeah. And back in the day when everybody was day trading, which I was doing in the early aughts in New York City, of course, coming out of banking, it was currency trading. And the way that currency trading had worked was literally fax machines, and you had to have like a lot of like 10 million minimum and to trade between banks. And this Olson and Associates guy is a brilliant guy out of Switzerland, and he built a platform that basically allowed anybody to trade down to $1 with really tight spreads. And so we built the first foreign currency trading platform. It trades today a crazy amount of dollar flow on a daily basis at this point.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's one of the things I love about doing this show is I invite my friends on and I get to learn all this stuff that I just don't know if you don't have these kind of conversations. It's amazing.
It was interesting with that company because, our base was out of Switzerland and we were in the Woolworth building in New York City, which is right next to the World Trade Center at 9/11. Wow, and half the guys that were on our floor were the Cantor Fitzgerald debt department. They were the only guys that, it was separate. So that was a really interesting time. I have sort of bittersweet memories around that company.
So you were in New York for 9/11. Holy shit.
Yeah. It's a moments and memories that will never leave you.
Yeah. How is that? Any thoughts about that? We just celebrated 21 years, right?
Yeah.
Or not, I don't know, celebrate is the wrong word. 100%.
Right. Honored, maybe.
Honored, yeah. Terrible choice of words.
Yeah, it's okay. I mean, it's one of those things when I think about it, it warms my heart in many ways because I think of like the strength and resiliency of people coming together, and certainly New
Mhm.
Yorkers. There's just like a special personality to a New Yorker and a special kind of strength. Um, Thinking about it now, if I'm honest, it was a time where people really came together, no matter what your political views were, right?
Yep.
It was sort of like we together, unified as a country, were
Mm.
attacked. So there's a piece of that that I feel sadly has gone away so much, that I
Yeah.
miss, where you could have conversations with people that thought differently, or these unifying events. I don't feel like we have them, and we certainly shouldn't have to have an awful traumatic event where many people lose their lives to do it. But coming off of it, I did feel like there was a very like unified America that I think we've lost since.
Mhm. Yeah, that's fair, and then maybe that speaks to the work that you do, because you do build community and you try to bring people together and, yeah, that
I hope so.
so, then you have a string of really cool gigs. I wanna get into the stuff you're doing now, but just how what was the mechanism or the how what got you back to LA?
Oh goodness. I was working at a company where we basically were moved it, and I was running the operations to do this to Memphis.
Mhm.
So, we were able to hire a bunch of people from FedEx into this like tech venture back thing. But customer service and tech folks we stole from FedEx, and it was a lot less expensive than at the height of New York City, like the rent and the pay and the whatever. So I was flying to Memphis like every other week and spending a week. And it was lovely at first. It was like music and fried green pickles and all of the meat sweats. And then it was just exhausting. And at that period of time, a bunch of people were calling me saying, why don't you come back? USC's here. There's an early buzz around technology companies. 6 people, I kid you not, had told me about Jason Nazar.
Yeah.
And we're like, you got to
So
meet this guy.
where were you? Were you at Verified at this time?
Yes, I
Yeah.
was a verified person in New York.
Yeah.
And this was before like the shit hit the fan, right?
Yeah.
And I was thinking about it. And then some shit hit the fan, and New York was like kind of a gray place. Um, and I thought, I'll go to LA for a couple of years, right? Like
Mhm.
New York's a grind. I love it, but I'll go out to LA and do this thing, and I'll come back because I was so identified with the New Yorkerness of it all. Um, and then I came here, and I think everybody should live in New York in their early 20s, even for like a year or two. It's such an
Mhm.
amazing place. I think, once I got here and once I'd gotten accustomed to it, it's a better lifestyle. And certainly in the technology space, even though everyone in technology as a whole has a certain degree of hustle, you know, New York is sort of the epicenter of that culture. And so I felt like, with a degree of self awareness, this was a better place for me.
Mhm.
Um, I think wherever you go, there you are. Yet at the same time, I do know that like warm weather makes me a
Yeah.
really, really happy person.
Yeah, yeah. One of my mentors says, "You can't create the magic, but you can create the conditions for the magic."
That's so
So
good.
and
There
it's
you go.
sort of, and that's, it changes in different environments, for different people, so, yeah, that's great. Well, that makes sense. So and you came back around 2010? Is that
No,
when you
I came back at the end of '08.
end of
Like,
'08?
right when it
Okay.
was going, I was like, "You know
Yeah.
what? Everybody's calling me, and this is happening, and it's all
Yeah.
happening for a reason. I'm gonna go."
And then the great financial crisis was sort of like kind of unwinding or starting off at that point, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. So
And I
you
came out and literally started working, Jason. Jason
yeah.
put me up in a furnished place to stay, and then was like, "Okay, you start like the next day." So I came out,
Mm.
and it was like, doc stock for the go. But when I came out, I was used to a meetup every night in New York City. And
Yeah.
I was like, Jason, how do I meet the community? Where are people at? And Jason loves community as well. That was how the Startups Uncensored started. We
Yep.
started it at DocStock. It was 15 people the first time. And over 2.5 years, it grew to hundreds of people that ended up being at the Milken Institute. But
Yeah.
that was really Jason and I coming together and going, oh, like there's a lot of community building that we could be doing here. So, I have fond memories of a lot of those people that were the earliest days, right? And many of whom are still around, but some who are not. But
Yeah.
yeah.
I love that event series. It was for the audience that wasn't in LA at that time. That was the place to go. It was sort of like homeroom for the
Yeah,
community on
it
a
was.
monthly
You'd see
basis.
everybody. Yeah.
Yeah. And you guys did that monthly. Yeah, I remember it'd be at Shutters. There'd be a few hundred people, always a rock star, high profile featured guest, and Jason would be MC. And it was kind of yeah, it was a whole thing. And then did it at the Milken Institute. And then
Then it
the
was the Fairmont, and one of the last ones was Kara Swisher, which I don't think she had really come down in that kind of way where it was, let me see LA, which is why it's so funny to me. I see a lot of the Twitters, people coming down from San Francisco now talking, LA, we're just doing LA's first tech week. I'm like, this was not LA's first tech week. And,
yeah,
2022 is not the year that LA was put on the map. Like it wasn't 2008 yet, but like, it
yeah,
could have been around 2016. I mean, we've been you know, number 3 on the venture dollars scene, and a very buzzy ecosystem for a while, right? But like I feel like the 2008 to 2010 was really like the seeding of it.
yeah. That was definitely kind of the Web 2.0 kind of flavor. What was it about Startups Uncensored that worked so well, do you think? Like, why
Well, there
was it?
wasn't really
What were
anything
the
like
elements?
that yet,
Yeah.
right? And everybody was so interested in how to get
Mhm.
involved, or this community is going to be, LA is a hub of entrepreneurs, right?
Mhm.
It's like, Garcetti always quotes this, something about how, I mean, I don't know how you do a census count. There are more entrepreneurs in Los Angeles than any other American city. So I'm just going to go with that's true, even though I haven't done the data to back it up. It
Yeah.
makes sense to me.
Yeah.
I feel like that was a time where it was just kind of taking off, and you had people from across industries wanting to understand, what is this thing? How can I get involved? I have an idea. How would I get funding? And we
Mhm.
just had like the right mix of people. So it was very formulative. That's not the right word. This goes back to,
Mhm.
I'm going to claim I'm a tired parent. Formative is the word I was looking for. To what it takes to build an ecosystem, right? Like you have to, you need the universities, and you need, the city to be excited to
Mhm.
adopt this. But really, it's like, do you have a few tentpole events and people that can gather everybody together? And I just feel like it was the right thing at the right time. And then, of course, like since then, obviously not in the last 3 years, but certainly following 2010 to 2018, we were more like New York, where there were 10 events a night, and it was hard to figure out what the good ones were for an
Yeah.
outsider. So, I think it was really a one of a kind, and then it was one of many kinds. And, I had gone on to do other things. And at some point, Jason was like, just done with it. I think it
Yeah,
served.
well, the business docstock.com, which was like,
Isn't
kind of
it
an on
funny? Documents online. And do you
yeah,
know how controversial it was? Like
that's
we were
funny.
threatened with lawsuits all the
Yeah,
time for putting documents online. Like today, that's so
yeah,
bonkers,
yeah, it was
right?
kind of like an early I don't know how early of a predecessor it was to LegalZoom, but it was really a handy resource if you wanted to, find business documents, and they had a library of some free stuff and a bunch of premium content. It was awesome.
It
I
was
helped
very
him
on
launch
brand for Jason
yeah,
and I, because we believed so much in the entrepreneurial ecosystem and basically what DocStock was. I mean, we had all kinds of documents, but mostly it was for entrepreneurs and
yeah,
small business owners. And it was like, this is the hub that can really provide you great content around how you do this and what to do. Um, so yeah, I mean, the name and the description of it don't quite um, give it sort of the credit that it deserves as like an early hub of helping people understand what it would take and what they would need to do to become an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I consulted with them for about 6 months in between City Sourced and Esri, and I had consulted for Esri as well, and helped them launch a new business line called License 123. And it was a really cool idea where you could punch in your address or where you wanted to start your business, and it would give you a list of all the permits you needed and have a 24/7 desk to be able to get all the business licenses and permits. And I ended up selling it into the city of LA and the city of San Francisco really quickly. And Jason was really impressed and offered me a gig full time, and I had to uh, respectfully decline because I had also done some work with Jack, the billionaire at Esri, and he recruited me to go work for him. So in hindsight, I probably would have made more money working with DocStock because I would have got some equity. But
Hindsight, that good old hindsight thing. I
yeah,
got so many stories of companies I should have worked at that
I
I
know
didn't take and took the other thing, right? I mean, you and me probably have. I got enough equity in various things to use as toilet paper for the rest
that's
of the
funny.
handwriter's
Yeah.
life.
Well, I think I bet right because I ended up meeting Holden, my wife, through the work at Esri, and that has been the best blessing of my life. So I think in the grand scheme, it worked out
Yes.
just fine. So one other thought about DocStock and the startups uncensored, and then I want to kind of get in, just keep turn the page. But how was that event as a mechanism for the DocStock of the business? How did it help you guys with BD and or hiring? Do you remember at all?
Yeah. You know, Jason's a master at this. It helped us with so many things.
Hmm.
He repeated this playbook a little bit of with Comparably. I don't
Yeah.
know if you were paying attention, but he did a career fair downtown and it was hosted by Comparably and he did
Yep.
some talks at it. And I'm like, he's literally, 8 years later using the DocStock playbook a little bit to do the same thing, to build the brand awareness in a niche that people want to go to your site, use your service, hiring, brand building, fundraising. All of that exposure came along with that because the events were bringing together entrepreneurs and teaching them about the ecosystem. And like that's often who was then coming to our website to then
Yep.
buy once we had monetization routes. So I think to some people it may not have connected the dots, but it was very intentional and connected. And Jason and I mean, I was BD, but I would say Jason really drove it. I mean, we would sit in rooms and we would like ROI shit out all the time, right? He had like a matrix, and it was like, this is what we're gonna get out of that. And I was sometimes like, listen, Jason, we're gonna stay here all night because sometimes it's hard to quantify certain things of branding and events, but like he would really try to quantify it. I think we would end up in like a happy middle. But it was a successful approach. And for a business started in 2008, it was a nice outcome and it had a real positive impact on helping draw people into the tech and entrepreneurial ecosystem
Yeah.
everywhere. But in particular, it was a real tentpole company in Los Angeles.
Yeah, yeah, they didn't raise very much money, sold it to Intuit, I think had a decent outcome for everybody. So, cheers to Jason and the rest of the crew. So that was awesome. Great vibe.
Right now, he's done it again with Comparably, and
Yeah,
he'll do it again on his new thing.
yeah.
Um,
So then you got a really awesome. You turned the page from an operator to an investor, and you had an amazing gig at UTA, United Talent Agency, running their strategic investment fund. Did a bunch of deals with even some of our customers. Micmac Hunt Club has helped with. We've done some work with some of the
I
other
was the
folks.
second check into that company. It's
That's
a
so
great
great.
company.
How did talk to us about that experience? What a cool role.
Yeah, so I guess I should say a little more. I went and launched and ran the investment fund, strategic investment fund for a talent agency, which at the time was like really out of character. I mean, I was
Yeah.
literally first gal in working on, you know, cardboard boxes, and then we'd hire an engineering team. There'd be 10 of us in a room. You never really got paid a lot, right? You took more equity, you took a lot of risks. in those early days, a lot more risk than even is asked for people to take now. Money was harder to get. And, I'd done it. I'd done it for a while. So part of me, I think, was a little tired. Like I needed a break from that. That's also very intense, 24/7 kind of work in those early days. Um, and UTA courted me. They knew I was a community builder. And what was happening is all the tech companies, sorry, all the entertainment companies were starting to go, we got to understand and pay attention to what's happening. I do use my hands because at one point in time, all of LA tech was, on the west side, which is why the horrible name Silicon Beach arose. But literally everybody was in Santa Monica and Venice at the time.
Yeah.
And then obviously entertainment was in West Hollywood and Beverly Hills and other places. So they wanted, what other companies were doing was having some talent agent person raise their hand and show up in a full suit to like a tech event, to which everybody would treat them like an alien outsider, which I'm not saying is a good thing, but it would be obvious what was happening.
Yeah.
And so, go back to USC, somebody I had known for a very long time who had followed me and known what I was doing and knew I was a builder of companies, but an ecosystem builder, called me in for a few meetings and was like, listen, he's really smart. His name's Brent Weinstein. He was like, we get it right now. I mean, now they're very entrenched, but they were like, oil and water at this point in time always. So we would rather hire somebody that has tech cred to build this than send an agent over because we know that's not going to work. And to be very honest, the first time I was like, no, I'm not your person. I don't want to work in a talent agency. Like that is not my jam. I like entertainment, but I'm not a super Hollywood celebrity driven thing. And agencies have very specific reputations, I'll say. And the more I talked to Brent, the more I met with his digital team. And they convinced me. And one of the things that didn't take a lot of convincing that I am proud of in my career is a part of it was, I had been sort of the lone woman outspoken advocate for more diversity, equity, and inclusion on the operating side, but I was starting to see a lot more women in these roles. And at the time they wanted me to move to the check writing in LA, it was just Dana Settle, right? Now we have a lot more women, but I was like, okay, I've been doing this operating grind. And this allows me to show up and add value on this other side because we really need to get more women writing checks. So I did it. And it was great. That. I mean, they gave me, I pitched Delta on a party plane and they let me have an exclusive list of 200 people to sit on a party plane to go to South by Southwest. And it became like UTA and Robyn's famous Nerd Bird. There were some really great things, but there were also, to be very frank, it was awesome. But there were some real challenges to coming into what is a very different culture than the culture I was used to. And sort of similar to banking. Like I said before, I loved it. It taught me a lot, but I was never going to be there for a lifer. The agency world was the same. I think Brent and I also both knew that this would be like a starter thing, but I might not be the person that goes here. And at 3.5 years, I had gotten myself a coach because I thought I would be happier than I was in the role. I was also turning a really important age where I was re-examining things. And it was actually through the work with a coach that I thought, I just love working with the founders. Yep. And I'm not liking the venture piece as much as I thought I would. And so I took this leap that everybody was like, what are you doing? Because this was before everybody was talking about coaching. I mean, I've been doing this.
I remember it was a real departure. So now kind of turning the page, you have your business Founder Forward, which is a coaching, content, and community aimed at helping startups and high growth companies achieve sustainable success. And your content is remarkable. I just love it.
Thank you.
And
I'm glad to know somebody reads it.
Like your newsletter and your stuff online. Anybody out there that wants like some really good, like just stuff, Instagram account's awesome too, Founder Forward. So Yeah. So who is the coach, by the way?
His name is Greg Sales,
Hmm.
and this goes back to old school. Do you remember Cam Kashani?
I do. Yeah. What was they had
Avesta and Cam.
yeah
Remember
they
they had
had
the first co-working space,
yeah
and I'm
Koloff.
blanking.
Koloff.
Koloff.
Yeah.
Cam Kashani recommended a coach to me, and his name was but is Greg Sales.
Yeah.
And he's amazing. And I will forever also be indebted for Cam. And she and I have really known each other for a very long
Yeah.
time.
She's great. I love her. We've kept in touch. What was missing for you at UTA?
Well, there were struggles
Hmm.
in the way that the structure was set up.
Hmm.
So what was missing was some of the impact. I didn't feel like it was set up to be as founder friendly, and that
Hmm.
was sort of my always been founder driven.
Yep.
And I
That
don't
makes
think that
sense.
it was in a intentional way, but it was a new organization trying to learn about an industry that's new to them. There were
Yeah.
struggles there.
Yeah.
But what was missing is venture has become a different ball game than it used to be. So much money out there. And the actual amount of time that people get to spend with the companies just keeps decreasing between the
Hmm.
marketing, because you're always fundraising and la, 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 la. And I had a lot of other dynamics to the job, right? It wasn't just the fun. Like I was representing entertainment and tech and taking all kinds of other meetings within the context of the agency.
Hmm.
So ultimately, I really missed one startups that weren't related to media and entertainment,
Yep.
right? Those are fine, but I also love things that are like solving shark bites and real problems and interesting things. So at some
Yeah.
point, I got tired of looking at influencer marketing platforms.
Sure.
But also, again, I just didn't feel like I had that connection with the founder. And I come to find that that is like my superpower is really helping and grow and develop folks into really great leaders,
Yeah.
right? Which they're really doing on their own. I'm serving as a partner to. I
Hmm.
realize, Kurty, and I'd be interested to see what you think about this because you've been around as many companies as I have been in our very long careers. 9 times out of 10, startup companies struggling, it has nothing to do with their product or their technology. It's people stuff, it's
Yeah.
human stuff.
100%.
It's
Yeah.
you're not understanding your blockers as a leader and where your fear is coming from. You're not understanding how you're showing up. You don't have a trained management team. They don't understand what it means to build interpersonal relationships. Your culture's a shit show, right? So I was like, that stuff nobody's talking about. Again, this was
Yep.
6 years ago before everybody's a startup coach. And
Yep.
so, again, I have a voice, I have a platform at a community. And so I really was early on the like, let's focus on this. And what came with that was also like mental health, because as I noted earlier, when I was in the startup phase, boy, was it a badge of honor. I mean, I used to think somebody was going to fly down and give me the award for killing myself for work. I mean, if you ask
Hmm.
Jason Nazar and Paige Craig, who was the biggest like animal hustler they'd ever met, they would probably both say me. And that used to like really give me a sense of honor. And that's not healthy, right? The way
Yeah.
that we gave everything to the company. And so part of the journey that I'm on with my founders is how do you build a sustainable company and a sustainable life? I believe you can. I wish that I understood this or had a coach even that far back to when I was in it, because I certainly have a lot of lessons learned, things I would
Yeah.
do
I
differently.
I love that. So a couple of thoughts. What is the offering that you're offering now, and what was sort of do you remember that aha moment when you were like, you know what, this I'm going to do this? So talk to us about those two things.
So
Like,
interesting. Okay. Um, I wasn't sure. And I thought, well, I got to go test this out and see what this is about. So I went to a program called Life Forward, which is a
mm,
3.5 day program at something called the Hudson Institute, which
yep,
does coach training. But they do a program that anybody can do, even if you're not a coach, if you're in transition or learning more about coaching. And, the part of the beauty of the coaching is that, like, you have to do your own work. So I went to this 3.5 day thing, and it was revelatory for me. And I was like, oh man, give me more, give me more. And that was the summer of 2017. I believe I did that and then came back and was like, hey, let's roll me out of UTA because I'm going to
Yeah.
go do this thing. And so that was the kickoff.
By the way, I'm looking at their site, hudsoninstitute.com, coaching
Yeah.
programs for organizations and also become a Hudson certified coach. The site looks amazing.
Yeah, it's an amazing place. I actually ended up getting my coaching certification from IPEC, which, there's lots of philosophies and programs out there, but I kind of loved that I did a little bit of the Hudson philosophy in this like jam-packed weekend, and then I chose a different route for the full program. But there's so many different programs out there. I do think that people that are looking for coaching should certainly ask if somebody has been trained in a program, because there's
Yeah.
so many these days that just kind of say they're a coach, and there is a real difference in skill set between coaching and advising, and I'm not sure that it's as well understood as it should be. So that's just a recommendation from.
Yeah, fair. I like that's a good distinction and good advice. So that makes sense. So you went to Hudson that way and you came back and you had that vision. How what are the offerings that you're offering now and how have they evolved? Are they pretty much the same
I
as what you're
love the
doing?
evolution question.
Yeah.
So I will say the first thing, which is how have I evolved as a coach? So I'm entering my 6th year. If I look at my first year and I'm really honest, I was just advising companies. It was really easy because that's I had 20 something years of experience, but I was just advising companies.
Mhm.
That's not what coaching is, right? That's not holding the space for long term transformation. Um, that's not holding the space for, somebody to have a generative moment where they see a new possibility. So I've evolved as I've really understood the craft and I've understood the importance of holding the space and presence and asking, the right questions, and are really allowing for the space through those questions to arise instead of just thinking through how am I going to get a big win by helping this person, right? I mean, there's a lot of work that's going on. So I have really shifted and my offering has shifted because I don't want to just be an advisor, right? I've done that and I do that on the side and do investments and things. I really want to work with people that want to go deeper and actually like make developmental level changes. So the questions and the conversations that I get into when we're in the exploratory call are much deeper and much different than at the beginning. So that the work has shifted. I'm always going to have my hat on a little bit. That's why people come to me, right? Like I have done this before. It's inside baseball. It's not to say that there isn't 20% of that, but I want 80% of it to be sort of the developmental transformational and like 70, 80, 20, 30. When I was first doing it, I was probably 100% the first year doing like advising and transactional. And then I've had a process of shifting it. So, if somebody's listening and thinking about coaching, it's fine to want either one of those things or a mix of both. But in your conversation with your coach, you should really suss out what they like to do and is it a fit with what you like to do
Mhm.
and do you agree upon the way it's going to work. That's something that a lot of people don't think about. So the type of coaching has changed. My offerings, because I have the teacher mindset, I create so much stuff, Kurty. I mean, because I was helping founders and realizing that the companies were breaking in the middle, I developed a management training.
Mhm.
I have something called Best Self Leadership, where I run leadership teams through this idea that leadership's an inside game, and we go through best practices so they can step up. This last year, I did the most amazing thing. It's new on my website. It's executive team training with a partner who has a really neat background. Our backgrounds are very complementary. She's in like organizational design and has been inside big companies. And we had an 8-person exec team at a startup, and we ran them through a program to help them be a better connected, higher performing team. And we just ran this whole program. We did 5 group facilitations, and then everybody got one-on-one alongside it to continue to dig into the work. Um, and I loved it. So I'm hoping that we sign more of that work. So, like evolution wise, one of the reasons why I love coaching is it's kind of what you want to make it. It's like, what do I
Yeah.
want to do? What do I think is important? Where do I think the opportunity to grow the most people is? And then I just kind of create around that. There's a lot of creativity that I didn't necessarily think when I went into coaching that it was going to be as creative, but I like the creativity.
Yeah, that's great. Any sort of case studies or transformations that you're really grateful or proud of that you can point to?
I wish I could say the name. I'm not going to, only because they
Yeah,
haven't asked. But this
yeah,
last program we did,
yeah.
when we did the wrap up, and it was 8 of them and me and my partner, the founder literally said that this was exceptional and that they were like functioning on a different level already, and we had just like finished things, right? And like there's still work to be done because we stay in so that we can help facilitate and hold them accountable, right? It's always easier to get into the program
Mhm.
for the time you do it, and then everybody forgets the behavior. So we're not at the end of the race yet, but it was really amazing to be running like a first of its kind program and have that kind of feedback. And because I'm coaching 4 of them one on one, I can see the changes in each of them, and I can get the feedback from them about how much easier their communications are, and how much clearer the decision making of the company is. That's really been rewarding.
Yeah, love that. Is there a stage that you're sort of, like, tall enough to ride? Like, they typically need to be seed and maybe, like, a max, like, alright, if it's series D, it might be too big or something like that?
I will say I have worked with every stage,
Yeah.
meaning even early, like one person. Um, Most of the time, to be able to afford it, because you can put it through your company, it's probably seed or beyond.
Yeah.
I run a women's group, so I try to make it more affordable. And in that group, it's a little less expensive, but it's peer coaching. So
Cool.
there are ways to do coaching that are maybe not the one-on-one that I try to do, because I like to try to help all stages. Um, but I have businesses that have raised a couple $100 million, so that's CDE stage.
Yeah,
Um,
awesome. And so people can go to founderforward.com. The newsletter is amazing. I recommend signing up for the email list and, following along online for sure. Yeah, and you're taking on new clients too, I'm assuming, right?
yes, I love speaking with new folks that are eager to learn and grow.
Sweet. Love that. Turning the page, I'm gonna put pause real quick. I see where I how are you doing if we go a few minutes over the half hour? A few
Okay.
Alright, cool, perfect. Alright, Levi, we're gonna edit that part out. So, thanks, Levi, you're the man. So kinda rounding third base, I love kind of doing the survey of your career, so amazing, and, one of the themes of the show is humanizing success, and part of I've shared some of my challenges with you, helping my dad get sober and getting my hearing, and that's transformed me. Is there anything in your life as sort of a challenge, professionally or personally, that you're comfortable sharing? And what gift did that, or how did you get over the kind of the hurdle or that challenge, and what gift did that pain give you?
Well, the answer is yes. I think we've all had challenges. I hope so, because those are the things that usually we grow the most from. Being a businesswoman that was in investment banking and then followed it up by being an operator in tech and then followed it up by sitting at the cross section of finance, tech, and entertainment. I've had a lot of challenges, being the one minority in a room. Um,
Yeah, I can imagine.
so, optimistically, I look at that as hoping to have opened some doors for some other women. But that certainly comes with your fair share of struggles and death by a thousand cuts, and discovering that even though you were the first employee, and now you're at 60, like make the least or have the least amount of equity, right? I mean, I've been through a lot of difficult situations. Um, and I mentor and talk to a lot of women about those. Those could never be underestimated, but they kind of file in they made me stronger. And that I'm the type of personality that speaks out about those. So that doesn't always win you favors in roles.
Yeah.
Um, but I am not, I wasn't the type that would stay silent about those things. So I feel good about that looking back, even if at the time it seemed like maybe I shouldn't have stood up for myself or somebody else. And then I will say, something, I adopted a child 2.5 years ago. And I do believe that everything happens the right time and the right reason. But I will say that there was a lot of my career where I was so heads down and only focused on building the business or
Hmm.
furthering my career that I was not as whole of a human, right? I mean, we all are because I am, right? But
Sure.
I was blocking off myself from being much more robust and really I feel like I had this lens, but I feel like society sort of puts this lens on that leadership and parenting were these very discrete things. And that one means you have to totally sacrifice the other or mess the other one up, and that you can't be good at both, and blah, blah, blah. And it turns out that's all bullshit because parenting is leadership. And great leaders leverage those skills to be parents, and people that were parents that launch businesses leverage great parenting skills to be great leaders of people. And it's been a happy surprise. But challenge wise, I would say, sort of realizing that I had some hopes for a family and that wasn't exactly how I spent my time, and that I still had an opportunity to go and do it and just do it differently. And then obviously there's all kinds of challenges to being a single parent and running a business, right?
Yeah.
So, because I'm a coach, I always look at the word challenge as opportunity. So,
Mm.
they're all challenges that were also opportunities.
Yeah, I really appreciate the candor, and it is amazing watching you raise Ryder. What a lucky little guy.
I'm so lucky to have him, but I will say it's the hardest thing I've ever done by
Yeah,
far, hands down. I mean,
yeah,
I thought, oh, okay, like I built companies, startups are a roller coaster. Parenting's a roller coaster. It
yeah,
really
sure.
is. It's the most rewarding roller coaster, but it's certainly the hardest thing I've ever done, which is thank God for community,
Mhm.
right? Parents and moms and people have just been so helpful to me. I've had a real village, and I really, really appreciate that.
Yeah, well, always open invite if you ever need Holden and I
I know
to
you're always like, you guys can just escape up here. I'm like, oh, Kurty's the nicest.
Um, on the equality side, what work needs to be done still? Like, or it, I know there's a lot of work, but, and I know the long arc of time bends towards justice. Maybe a better question is like, where's the highest leverage or where's the low hanging fruit next in that? I mean, even like in the context of what like Jason Azar did it comparably with trying to get people to like understand their compensation and
Huge, right? So that's the conversation I was on last night, which is we're using data, right? And using technologies. Like once we shine the light on this problem, even though it's taking a little bit longer than we would like, there are a lot of companies. Jason's is one of them. PayScale, which is the company that was sort of the sponsor for last night. Um, there are a lot of people doing a lot of things,
Mhm,
right? Um, I find the following, at least in our space, that what ultimately ends up moving people quicker in our space is when a VC puts a clause in a term sheet, which Mark Suster and many people followed for inclusion and diversity, which is they said their startups needed to do a Rooney Rule, which was for every hire they needed to interview an underrepresented candidate. I would like to have VCs talk about or request some degree of pay transparency, right? Because when we're really talking about inclusion, it's like, okay, we can get people in. That took a lot of work. There's still a lot of work to be done. But what I see at companies that actually tout their diversity is like, if you really looked at them over 2.5 years, those people leave because they don't feel included, and they feel, they find out they're making X amount on the dollar, and they're, the one person or two people, and they're out. So, I think if VCs were to bring it in, but I'll tell you what, in almost every state, and really in the states that we play, like Seattle, California, sorry, Washington State, but
Yeah.
California, New York, Colorado, um, there's a lot of legislation around what's going to go down with pay transparency. And so I don't care what the stick needs to be. It would be nice if we could all just take the carrot, which is to say that diverse companies perform better and we have data. And it's not just the right thing to do, it's, good for business to be doing these practices. But that is a slow roll. So I think with the carrot, we have the stick of legislation in BC. And then, of course, just the more women funding companies, the more women founding companies is going to lead to like a different way that all of this looks. There's a lot of touch points. I, like
Yeah.
you, do feel that I mean, literally in the early odds, I didn't even see women at any events I went to, right? Like, I feel like it's we've gone in a really good direction. We're not there yet, but, I hosted a female founder and investor event last week with a few women. And I think, everybody was excited to do a big event after COVID, but we just threw it out there. It was at somebody's house. 100 people RSVP'd. That's a lot of people. And then we were like, well, it's LA, so it's the LA discount, right? Like, we'll only get 30. And I think we got 70 something. That's a big turnout.
Yeah, I saw the photos. It looked amazing.
Yeah.
Everybody looked so happy, and, yeah, that's great. Anecdotally, Hunt Club has a lot of females compared to other companies that I've worked with. I should know the data, but, I'm pretty sure that we have a lot more females at the firm, and, there's sort of a nurturing quality that, working with female colleagues, I find to be, really great for clients. And, like, and there's just a more higher EQ. Um, yeah, I'm all about it. So that's
Yes, but
great.
also you're a higher EQ man, right? So it registers with you.
Yeah, I try. I think maybe, being around higher EQ people help me pull me up. So I still have a lot to learn, but yeah. Well, that's great. Turning the page is kind of final, kind of rapid fire questions, and we'll wrap it up and let you get back to your evening. Best boss or partner you ever had? Who was it and why?
Well, two of them everybody knows in LA, and they're going to get mad if I don't say one or the other. So I'm actually not going to go with either. A man named James Davis, who came into a messy situation in a startup I worked at, fired a lot of people, kept me. Um, because he was much older, is basically like bringing an adult into a very young company. He had worked with Andy Grove, literally brought in the
Cool.
one-on-ones and like candid conversation, and literally used to say to me, Robyn, you need to say more using less. And it sticks
Mm.
with me, right? I sometimes like keep talking and I need to be brief. Um, he just really taught me so much, and he taught me early about management. And I think that's why I fell in love with it and sort of have ended up in a space in and around, because he really came in and put attention to our culture and to the way people were leading and managing. And it literally shifted the whole company to the point where like we had a sale and everything was much better. At one point, we thought it was going to explode in not a good
What
way.
company was that?
Verified Person, the same
Cool.
company that we
Yeah,
ended
yeah,
up moving
yeah,
to Memphis,
yeah,
mostly
great.
because also James lived in Memphis. But
Yeah.
for a year and a half underneath him, he won't care that I say this, like a late 60s guy comes in, and really he'd been at, umpteen technology companies that were 10,000 plus people. And, we think we're running a company here, is a bunch of young yahoos, and this guy comes in, and wow, it was just like a first class education in all of these things that you don't normally see get implemented in startups. So
Yeah.
sorry, Jason and Paige, I'm going with James Davis.
Yeah, and Andy Grove at Intel was a legend, and,
Right.
he inspired a lot of, really, people in Silicon Valley, and beyond, of course. Um, we both love music, and I think I know the answer to this question or part of it. But if you could magically have any band play any venue, who would it be and where? It could be in the past, present, or future.
Okay, I don't know. I'm going to cheat and just say that on Tuesday night, I'm going to what I think is going to be the concert of my life.
Yes.
And it's going to be sad in some ways, but it's going to be amazing. I am all in for the Taylor Hawkins tribute show. I love the
Oh.
Foo Fighters.
Mm,
I love Nirvana. I mean, that's my generation, right?
yep.
I live for Dave Grohl. His book is amazing if anybody hasn't, and if you do the Audible because he's doing it. But I believe that that show is going to rock, and I know that it's going to have a million guest folks that are coming in LA, and I'm not sure I've ever been as excited for a show as I am for this show. I just wish it wasn't for the cause of having lost, one of the most amazing drummers. But show wise, music wise, I think it's probably going to blow my mind.
Yeah, I'm looking at the site right now. I just got the chills. I got to be in a Foo Fighters music video once.
What?
Yeah, and it was Monkey Wrench.
How?
My friend Jack Johnson was filming it because he's also a filmmaker, and his best friend and manager Emmett Malloy was directing the video, so they needed a bunch of extras. And Taylor was so fun on the set. He was great. So that
They're
was real.
hilarious. I mean, they're
Yeah.
such fun loving. It's very sad. They did a part of the tribute they did in London, and you should go look at the London show to see the crazy cast of characters that came to play with them. And so my expectation in LA is going to be amazing. Listen, the last Foo Fighters show I went to, Stevie Nicks walked out. And
Oh my
I mean, I
gosh.
lost my damn mind, Kurty.
Wow, what a great unexpected pairing. That's some
Yeah,
flavor right
yeah. So
there.
so here's what I would really like. I would like my girl Joan Jett,
Yes, that's who I
who
thought
has
you were gonna
played
say.
with the Foo Fighters before, because
Yes.
Pat Smear, right? I mean, you probably know this because you love music like I do, goes all the way back to the Germs, and
Mhm.
that's all punk rock. The first producer of the Germs album and distributor was Joan Jett. Pat and Joan have been friends forever, but Joan is very underrated by many people. She has impacted almost all these rock and roll guys, right? Obviously the women too, but if you Billy Joe Armstrong, Pat Smear, Dave always says like Joan Jett influenced everything we did. So Joan lives in New York, but if they're going to do a show and they're going to bring people on stage, if the Joan Jett were to play at this Taylor Hawkins final Foo Fighters show tribute, I'm glad this might be my last recording of of me as a live human because that would maybe be too much for me.
Oh, I love that. Well, you're gonna have a great time, and RIP Taylor Hawkins. You're a
Yes.
real sweet
Yes.
soul. Closing up, how can our audience be helpful to you, Robyn?
I don't know. I mean, I do. I'm not the best writer, but I have hopefully lessons to get across and insights. And so, sometimes I write and I'm like, is anyone reading this? And then every once in a while, somebody says, hey, I came across, your thing on burnout, and it really was helpful. So I would just say, subscribe to the newsletter, or go read some of the stuff. I put time into it, and sometimes you never know when you put it out there. So if any of this was interesting, or if entrepreneurship and startups is your gig, maybe go read my content. Certainly, if anybody is um, looking for coaching, I coach almost exclusively founders. I do the management training and workshops and all of that, but I also just have a very good network of founders that I work with and really great folks that almost all mostly have a startup background. So I try within reason to take calls with folks, because if it's not a fit for me, then I have introductions or folks, also a lot of people just don't understand how coaching works, right? And
Yeah.
I think it's such a great tool for everybody's growth that I do just have a lot of calls where I'm just kind of giving people the 411 on like what it is, what it should look like, questions that will be helpful on the journey. So, if people have those kinds of questions, I think you're going to provide my email somewhere. It's Robyn at Founder Forward. Pretty simple. Um,
Cool. Yeah, that's Robyn with a Y, ROBY, and
with a Y, yes.
yeah. And then if people want to follow along online, what's a good channel?
Twitter, and here's why. I crossed 5,000 users on Saturday. Finally, I was stuck at like 49.98. Not that I should care, anybody should care, but it's like a milestone. And now I'm back to 49.93, and I just want to go. I'm like, better.
That's
But
so
I
funny.
do engage a lot in Twitter. I
Yeah.
know there's a downside to Twitter, but the startup community is really on it, and I really enjoy it as a medium. And also, I share a lot of articles that are not mine, just things I read that I think are really great. I curate and post. So Twitter is probably a really great way for somebody to kind of keep up with um, growth and learning development, but with the lens of a high growth company.
Yeah, great. Awesome. Well, I do love following you on Twitter. And well, that's a wrap. Robyn, I thank you so much. We went longer than usual because I could just talk to you forever. And I just have
I
so much
feel the same
love.
way.
I have so much love and respect for you. I'm so grateful that we're friends. And I'm so grateful that I found my way to the LA tech community because I get to meet awesome people like you. And it just keeps getting better.
It does, doesn't it? I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. Well, I love
Thank
you and
you.
we'll stay
Thank you
close.
for inviting me on. And I'm sorry it took us so long to get it done.
All good.